Eric Mason sat in the back row of his xenobiology class, trying to stay awake. The classroom was filled with 20 other students, all staring at the holographic display of alien sea creatures projected at the front. Westridge High School was one of the few schools on Earth that offered direct alien instruction, and most students considered it an honor to be taught by Professor Zarlax, a blue-skinned visitor from the Centauri Alliance. Eric didn't feel honored today. He was tired. He had been up since 4 a.m. helping his father on their fishing boat before school. The smell of the ocean and fresh catch still clung to his clothes and hands despite his quick shower. And so the aquatic lifeforms of Proxima Centauri b have developed communication methods that rely on both sound waves and bioluminescence, Professor Zarlax explained, his 4 eyes blinking at different times as he spoke. The alien teacher paced, back and forth, his long limbs moving with surprising grace for someone not born on Earth. He stopped suddenly, his nose slits flaring. Professor Zarlax turned his head slowly, scanning the classroom. The alien's sense of smell was much stronger than a human's. He could detect scents that humans couldn't even perceive. His nose slits flared again and his eyes narrowed. "There is a disturbing smell in this classroom," he announced. The students looked at each other, confused. Some of them sniffed the air, but couldn't smell anything unusual. Professor Zarlax walked between the rows of desks, following the scent. He stopped right in front of Eric's desk. The teacher's blue skin darkened slightly, a sign of disgust in his species. "You," Professor Zarlax said, pointing at Eric. "You smell like fish." The classroom went quiet. Then someone in the front row snickered. Soon, half the class was laughing. Eric's face burned with shame. He shrunk in his seat, wishing he could disappear. "This smell is disrupting my teaching and distracting the class," Professor Zarlax declared. "You need to leave and clean yourself properly before returning to my classroom." "But, Professor," Eric protested weakly, "I showered this morning. I just helped my dad on his fishing boat before school." "I don't care what primitive occupation your father has chosen," Professor Zarlax said. "When you enter my classroom, you will be clean and presentable. The smell of dead aquatic creatures is extremely offensive to my species." More laughter rippled through the classroom. Eric saw his classmate Derek Mills whispering to his friend Jason, both of them smirking in his direction. "My dad isn't primitive," Eric said quietly, but his voice was drowned out by the laughter. "Leave now, please," Professor Zarlax said, pointing to the door. "You can return when you no longer smell like common Earth seafood." Eric gathered his books and walked out of the classroom, his eyes fixed on the floor. He could feel everyone watching him. As the door closed behind him, he heard Derek's voice. "Guess the fish boy needs to swim back to the ocean." More laughter followed him into the hallway. Eric went to his locker and leaned his head against the cool metal. It wasn't his fault that his family still ran one of the last natural fishing operations on the eastern seaboard. Most people got their seafood from the massive aquaculture farms now, but his father believed in traditional methods. "Hey, are you okay?" Eric turned to see Lily Rodriguez standing next to him. Lily was in his xenobiology class too, but she never laughed at anyone. "I'm fine," Eric mumbled. "Professor Zarlax shouldn't have embarrassed you like that," Lily said. "My mom says Centaurians are super sensitive about smells. It's not your fault. It doesn't matter," Eric said. "Everyone thinks I'm a joke now. Fish boy from the stinky old boat." "I don't think that," Lily said. "I think it's cool that your dad still does traditional fishing. My grandfather was a fisherman in Florida before all the regulations changed." Eric smiled weakly. "Thanks, Lily." "Are you going home?" she asked. "I guess so." "I can't go back to class smelling like this," Eric said, gesturing to himself. "My dad will pick me up if I call him." "Okay, I'll share my notes with you tomorrow," Lily offered. "Thanks," Eric said again. After Lily went back to class, Eric called his father on his comm unit. "Dad, can you pick me up from school?" Eric asked. When his father answered, "What's wrong? Are you sick?" Sam Mason's concerned voice came through clearly. "No, I got kicked out of xenobiology class because I smell like fish," Eric explained, the words burning in his throat. Professor Zarlak said I can't come back until I'm clean. There was a long pause on the other end. Dad? I'll be there in 20 minutes, Sam said, his voice unnaturally calm. Eric waited outside the school building. The spring air was cool, but the sun felt warm on his face. He tried not to think about going back to class tomorrow, facing everyone after being kicked out for smelling bad. His thoughts were interrupted by the distant hum of an approaching vehicle. Eric looked up, expecting to see his father's old truck, the one they used to transport fish to the market. Instead, a sleek pearl-white Bentley hover ship was descending toward the school's landing pad. Eric stared in confusion. The Bentley was one of the most expensive vehicles on the market, complete with anti-gravity technology and a fusion engine. Only the wealthiest people could afford such luxury. The hover ship landed gracefully on the pad. The door slid open, and Eric's father stepped out. Sam Mason was wearing his usual fisherman's jacket, the worn blue one with patches on the elbows, but there was something different about the way he carried himself, straight-backed and purposeful. In his hand was a sophisticated data pad that seemed out of place with his weathered appearance. Eric's mouth fell open. Dad? What? How? Whose ship is that? Sam walked over to his son and put a hand on his shoulder. It's mine, Eric. Has been for years. I just don't use it much. But how? We're fishermen, Eric said, still staring at the hover ship. His father smiled slightly. We are fishermen, but before that, before you were born, I was something else too. He paused. Let's go inside. I think it's time I had a talk with your teacher and the principal. Dad? You don't have to. Eric started to protest. Yes. I do, Sam said firmly. No one should shame you for the honest work we do, and Professor Zarlax needs to learn a little something about Earth customs and respect. As they walked back toward the school building, students who had free periods were gathering by the windows, pointing at the Bentley hover ship on the landing. Eric felt his father's hand on his shoulder, steady and sure. For the first time that day, he stood up straight, no longer ashamed. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing for certain. Tomorrow at school was going to be very different. Eric and his father walked through the main doors of Westridge High School. Students in the hallway stopped and stared. Word had spread quickly about the fancy Bentley hover ship that had landed on the school pad. Dad, everyone is looking at us, Eric whispered. Sam Mason nodded. Let them look. We have nothing to be ashamed of. They made their way to the principal's office. The school secretary, Mrs. Bell, looked up in surprise when they entered. Hello, I'm Sam Mason, Eric's father, Sam said. I'd like to speak with Principal Miller and Professor Zarlax, please. Mrs. Bell blinked a few times. Professor Zarlax is teaching right now, Mr. Mason. This can't wait, Sam said firmly. My son was just removed from class for smelling like fish. I work as a fisherman. That smell is the result of honest work. Mrs. Bell nodded slowly. I'll call them both right away, Mr. Mason. Please have a seat. Eric and his father sat in the waiting area. Eric noticed his father was unusually quiet, tapping on his datapad with quick, skilled movements. This was not the same man who struggled with the digital fish market apps and asked Eric for help with technology. Dad, what's going on? Eric asked quietly. Sam looked at his son with a small smile. Just setting things right. The door to Principal Miller's office opened. Principal Miller was a tall woman with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked at Sam with a mix of curiosity and concern. Mr. Mason? I'm Principal Miller. Please come in. Sam stood up. My son comes too. Principal. Miller nodded. Of course, they entered the office. Professor Zarlax was already there, his blue skin slightly darker than usual, a sign of irritation among his species. Thank you for interrupting my class for this issue, Professor Zarlax said, his voice cold. Principal Miller sat behind her desk. Professor Zarlax tells me there was an incident in class today. My son was publicly humiliated and removed from class for smelling like fish, Sam said calmly. He helps me on our fishing boat before school. That smell is the result of honest work. Professor Zarlax's nose slits flared. The smell is highly offensive to my species. It disrupts my ability to teach. I understand that different species have different sensitivities, Sam said. But there are ways to handle such situations with respect and dignity. Principal Miller looked uncomfortable. Mr. Mason, we value our partnership with the Centauri Alliance. Professor Zarlax is one of only 5 Centaurian educators on Earth. I'm aware of that, Sam said. He placed his datapad on the desk and pressed his thumb against the screen. A holographic display appeared above it, showing complex technical schematics. But I'm also the developer of the Cetacean Centauri translation matrix. The room went silent. Professor Zarlax's 4 eyes widened, all blinking at once. That's not possible, the alien teacher said finally. The translation matrix was developed by Dr. Samuel Mason, the xenolinguist who revolutionized interspecies communication. Yes, Sam said simply. That's me. Principal Miller stared at Sam in shock. You're Dr. Mason, but you're a fisherman, Sam finished for her. Yes, I chose that life after years in research. I wanted my son to grow up understanding the value of simple work and our planet's natural resources. Professor Zarlax's skin had turned a pale blue, almost white, a sign of extreme surprise or shock in his species. Dr. Mason, the alien teacher said, his voice now respectful. Your work made it possible for my people to communicate with humans without painful sonic feedback. Without the translation matrix, I could not teach on Earth. I know, Sam said, which is why I find it ironic that you would shame my son for smelling like fish, when the core component of the translation matrix was inspired by cetacean communication patterns I observed while fishing with my father. Eric looked at his father in amazement. He had always known his dad was smart, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. His father was famous, respected even by aliens. Principal Miller seemed to be struggling to find words. Dr. Mason, I had no idea. Your contribution to interspecies education is taught in our curriculum. I don't advertise who I was, Sam said. I value my privacy and the simple life I've chosen, but I will not allow my son to be shamed for being part of that life. Professor Zarlax's skin gradually returned to its normal shade of blue. I must offer my sincere apologies to both you and your son. My behavior was disrespectful. Eric couldn't believe what he was hearing. Professor Zarlax, the strictest teacher in school, was apologizing to him. I would like to make this right, the alien teacher continued. Perhaps you would consider speaking to my class about your work, Dr. Mason. It would be an honor. Sam looked at Eric. What do you think, son? Eric was still processing everything he had just learned about his father. I think it would be cool. Sam nodded. I'll do it on one condition. I want the class to understand that all honest work has value, whether it's developing translation technology or catching fish to feed people. Agreed, Professor Zarlax said immediately. Principal Miller stood up. This is an incredible opportunity for our students. Dr. Mason, would you be willing to speak to other classes as well? Let's start with one class and see how it goes, Sam said. For now, I'd like to take my son home. We can schedule the talk for tomorrow. As they left the office, Eric noticed that students in the hallway were still staring, but now they were pointing at his father and whispering excitedly. News traveled fast in high school. Dad, why didn't you ever tell me? Eric asked as they walked toward the exit. Sam put his arm around his son's shoulders. I wanted you to grow up normally, not as the son of some famous scientist. I wanted you to find your own path. But everyone made fun of me for being a fisherman's son, Eric said, and now they know that appearances can be deceiving, Sam replied. Just like that fish smell they mocked you for. There's more to it than they realized. Eric looked up at his father. What do you mean? Sam smiled mysteriously. You'll find out tomorrow. They walked out into the sunlight, toward the gleaming Bentley hovership that still had students pressing their faces against the school windows to get a better look. Eric sat on the couch in their modest living room, watching his father work. Their house was small and simple, located near the coast where they kept their fishing boat. The walls were decorated with fishing nets, old maps, and a few family photos. Nothing in their home suggested that Sam Mason was once a famous scientist. "So all those early mornings on the boat," Eric said. "Were you doing research then too?" Sam looked up from his data pad. "Sometimes. The ocean is full of knowledge, Eric. Whales and dolphins communicate in ways that helped me understand how centaurians process sound. That was the key to developing the translation matrix. Why did you give it all up? You could be rich, living in a mansion instead of this small house." Sam smiled. "I am rich, just not in the way most people think about wealth. After your mother died, I wanted a simpler life. I wanted to raise you away from all the attention and pressure, and I've always loved fishing. My father taught me just like I taught you." Eric nodded slowly. "That Bentley hover ship must have cost a fortune." "It was a gift from the Centauri Alliance," Sam admitted. "Payment for my work. I rarely use it because it attracts too much attention." Eric thought about all the times kids at school had made fun of him for being a fisherman's son, for their old truck, for the smell of fish that sometimes clung to his clothes. All this time, his father could have changed everything with just a word. "Dad, what did you mean yesterday? About the fish smell being more than they realized?" Sam stood up. "Come with me." Eric followed his father to the small shed behind their house. Sam unlocked the door with a fingerprint scan, something Eric had always thought was odd for a simple storage shed. Inside was not the collection of fishing gear Eric expected. Instead, the shed was a high-tech laboratory with holographic displays, analysis equipment, and samples of different colored liquids in special containers. "Wow," Eric breathed. "This is where I continue my research," Sam explained. "On a much smaller scale than before, but important work nonetheless." He walked over to a refrigerated case and took out a small vial of clear liquid with a slight blue tint. "This is what you smelled like yesterday," Sam said, holding up the vial. "It's not fish. It's a compound I've been developing based on cetacean, pheromones, and certain algae that grow only in deep ocean trenches." "What does it do?" Eric asked. "It enhances telepathic reception in empathic species," Sam explained. "I've been testing small amounts, checking stability in Earth's atmosphere. You've been helping me by carrying trace amounts on your skin after handling the samples." Eric stared at the vial. "So I didn't smell like fish?" "To humans, no. To centaurians and other species with enhanced olfactory senses, it has a scent similar to earthfish but much more complex. And Professor Zarlax thought I just smelled bad," Eric said, starting to understand. "His reaction actually gave me valuable data," Sam said with a small smile. "Though I wouldn't have chosen to collect it at your expense." Eric sat down on a lab stool. "So what happens now?" "Now we prepare for tomorrow's presentation," Sam said. "I think it's time to share some of this research with your class." That evening they worked together preparing slides and demonstrations. For the first time, Eric saw his father as Dr. Samuel Mason, brilliant scientist, rather than just Sam, the fisherman. It was strange but exciting. The next morning, Eric was nervous as they drove to school in the old truck. His father had decided to leave the Bentley at home. "No need to show off," Sam had said. As they walked through the school hallways, students stopped and stared. Some pointed and whispered. Eric saw Derek and Jason watching with wide eyes. Lily appeared beside him. "Everyone's talking about your dad," she said. "Is it true he invented the translation technology that lets us talk to aliens?" Eric nodded. "Yeah, but he's still a fisherman too." "That's so cool," Lily said. "Are you okay after yesterday?" "I'm better now," Eric said. "Actually, there's more to the story. You'll see in class." When they entered the xenobiology classroom, the students were already seated and waiting eagerly. Professor Zarlax stood at the front, his skin a respectful shade of deep blue. "Class," the alien teacher announced. "Today we have a great honor. Dr. Samuel Mason, creator of the Cetacean Centauri Translation Matrix, will be speaking to us. But first, I wish to make a public apology. Professor Zarlax turned to Eric. Eric, Mason, I treated you disrespectfully yesterday. I made assumptions and acted inappropriately. I am deeply sorry. The classroom was silent. No one had ever heard Professor Zarlax apologize to anyone. It's okay, Eric said. I understand why you reacted that way now. Professor Zarlax nodded gratefully, then gestured to Sam. Dr. Mason, please. Sam walked to the front of the classroom. He was wearing his usual fisherman's clothes, but he carried himself with quiet confidence. Good morning, he said. I'm Sam Mason. Some of you know me as Eric's dad, the local fisherman. Others may have heard of my work in xenolinguistics and translation technology. He looked around the classroom. Both identities are equally important to me. Sam activated his datapad, and a holographic display appeared, showing Earth's oceans and various marine species. Today I want to talk about how humanity's understanding of oceanic life on Earth helped us communicate with alien species. He said. And I want to explain why my son smelled the way he did yesterday. The students leaned forward in their seats, suddenly even more interested. The smell that Professor Zarlax detected was not just ordinary fish, Sam explained. It was a compound I've been developing. Eric has been helping me test it. He pressed a button on his datapad, and the hologram changed to show the molecular structure of the compound. This compound enhances telepathic reception by 200% when used by empathic species like the Navidians. Eric watched as his classmates' expressions changed from curiosity to amazement. Derek, who had laughed the loudest yesterday, now looked completely stunned. Eric, Sam called, would you mind helping me with a demonstration? Eric went to the front of the class. For once, he didn't feel embarrassed or out of place. He stood tall beside his father, ready to show his classmates that there was much more to both of them than anyone had realized. Eric stood next to his father at the front of the classroom. All eyes were on them. Even Professor Zarlax seemed eager to see what would happen next. For this demonstration, Sam explained, I need a volunteer with no prior exposure to telepathic communication. The students looked at each other nervously. Humans rarely had natural telepathic abilities, and most had never experienced mind-to-mind contact with alien species. To everyone's surprise, Lily raised her hand. I'll try, she said. Thank you, Lily, Sam said with a warm smile. Please come. Up here. Lily walked to the front and stood on the other side of Sam. Now Eric has been handling the compound in small amounts, Sam explained. Traces of it are on his skin. I'm going to ask Professor Zarlax to attempt basic telepathic contact with Lily first, then with Eric. The difference should be noticeable. Professor Zarlax stepped forward. I should explain that Centaurians have limited telepathic ability with humans under normal circumstances. We can sense strong emotions, but not thoughts. Exactly, Sam said, which makes this a perfect test. Sam took a small device from his pocket and handed it to Lily. This will display a simple image. Look at it, focus on it, and Professor Zarlax will try to detect what you're seeing. Lily nodded and pressed the button on the device. A small hologram appeared, visible only to her. She stared at it intently. Professor Zarlax stood about 3 feet away and closed his lower set of eyes, keeping his upper eyes open. This was the Centaurian posture for telepathic focus. After 30 seconds, the alien teacher opened all 4 eyes. I sense something round, perhaps a ball or sphere. Lily turned the device so everyone could see. It showed a red apple. Close, Sam commented. Shape detection, but no color or specific details. Next, Sam handed the device to Eric. Your turn, son. Eric pressed the button, and a new image appeared. He focused on it just as Lily had done. Professor Zarlax again assumed his telepathic posture. This time his skin began to shimmer slightly, turning a lighter shade of blue. After only 10 seconds, his eyes opened wide. A yellow star with 8 points, Professor Zarlax said confidently, surrounded by a green circle. Eric showed the image to the class. It was exactly as Professor Zarlax had described. The students gasped. Professor Zarlax looked amazed. The difference is remarkable, the alien teacher said. Not only could I detect the image clearly, but I received it much faster. Sam nodded. The compound acts as a receptor enhancer. It strengthens telepathic signals and makes them clearer. He turned to address the whole class. This technology has huge implications for diplomacy and communication with telepathic species. The Nevidians, key members of the Galactic Council, rely primarily on telepathy. Current translation technology is imperfect for them. Eric watched his classmates' faces. They were completely captivated. Derek, who had made fun of Eric yesterday, was now watching with his mouth slightly open. But the most interesting part, Sam continued, is that we discovered this compound by studying Earth's oceans. The fish that Eric and I catch, the ones that made him smell the way he did yesterday, led us to this breakthrough. He put a hand on Eric's shoulder. This is why all knowledge is valuable. This is why we should respect all forms of work and study. Professor Zarlax nodded emphatically. An important lesson for us all. Sam went on to explain more technical details about the compound. Eric watched proudly as his father answered complex questions from the students. Even Professor Zarlax asked questions, treating Sam with the respect due to a fellow scientist. When the bell rang at the end of class, no one wanted to leave. Several students crowded around Sam, asking more questions. Others approached Eric. That was amazing, said a girl named Kelly. Your dad is so cool. I had no idea, said Jason, who had laughed with Derek yesterday. Sorry about, before. Eric just nodded, still processing how much had changed in just one day. Derek approached last, looking uncomfortable. Hey, Eric, that was really interesting. He paused, then added, Sorry I called you Fish Boy. It's okay, Eric said, surprised to find he meant it. Yesterday seemed very far away now. As the students finally left for their next classes, Lily stayed behind. That was incredible, Eric. Why didn't you ever say anything about your dad's work? I didn't know most of it, Eric admitted. I knew he used to be a scientist, but not all the details. He kept it private, wanted a normal life for us. Principal Miller came into the classroom as the last students were leaving. Dr. Mason, that was exceptional. The students will be talking about this for weeks. Sam smiled. I hope they remember the lesson about respecting different types of knowledge and work. I'm sure they will, Principal Miller said. I have a request. The Centauri Embassy is hosting a reception next month for educators and scientists. Would you consider attending as our school's guest of honor? It would be wonderful recognition for Westridge High. Sam looked at Eric. What do you think? Up for a fancy event? Eric thought about it. A week ago, he would have been terrified at the idea of attending an embassy reception. But now, things felt different. Sure, why not? Excellent, Principal, Miller said. I'll send you the details. As they left the classroom, Professor Zarlax stopped them. Dr. Mason, your compound. Have you submitted it to the Galactic Scientific Council for review? Not yet, Sam replied. It's still in the testing phase. I would be honored to help with the submission process, the alien teacher offered. With my connections in the Centauri scientific community, approval could be expedited. Sam looked thoughtful. That's a generous offer. Let me think about it. As they walked through the hallway, Eric noticed students watching them with new respect. No one was laughing or whispering insults. Dad, Eric said quietly. Everything's different now, Sam nodded. That's how life works sometimes. One day can change everything. Are you going to go back to being a scientist full-time? Eric asked, suddenly worried. Sam shook his head. No, I'm going to keep being exactly who I am, a fisherman who does science. And you're going to keep being who you are, my son, my fishing partner, and now my research assistant if you want to be. Eric smiled. For the first time in a long while, he felt completely proud of who he was and where he came from. 2 months later, Eric stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his formal suit. It was the night of the reception at the Centauri Embassy. He had never worn such fancy clothes before, and they felt strange. You look great, son, Sam said, entering Eric's room. He was also wearing a formal suit, but somehow he made it look natural and comfortable. "I'm nervous," Eric admitted. "There will be so many important people there." "Just be yourself," Sam advised. "That's more than enough." The Bentley hovership, which had remained hidden in their garage since the day at school, now waited outside their house. This time they would need its elegance for the embassy event. As they flew toward the embassy in the city, Eric looked out at the lights below. So much had changed in the past 2 months. At school, he was no longer the boy everyone made fun of. Instead, students often asked him questions about his father's research and their fishing work. Lily had become a close friend. She had a natural interest in science and often visited their house to see the laboratory and help with simple experiments. Professor Zarlax had changed too. He now showed respect to all students, regardless of their background. He had even arranged a special class trip to the Masons' fishing boat to learn about Earth's marine ecosystems. The Bentley descended onto the embassy landing pad. The Centauri Embassy was a beautiful building with curved, flowing architecture that resembled ocean waves. Soft blue lights illuminated the exterior, giving it an otherworldly glow. As they entered, Eric was amazed by the grand reception hall. Humans in formal attire mingled with aliens of different species. Some he recognized from his textbooks. Others were completely new to him. Principal Miller approached them immediately. "Dr. Mason, Eric, I'm so glad you could come. There are many people eager to meet you." She led them through the crowd, introducing them to educators, scientists, and diplomats. Eric tried to remember all the names, but soon gave up. There were too many. After about an hour of introductions and small talk, a soft chime sounded. The crowd moved toward the center of the hall, where a small stage had been set up. A tall Centaurian in formal robes stepped onto the stage. Eric recognized him from news reports as Ambassador Zalnar, the head of the Centauri delegation to Earth. "Honored guests," Ambassador Zalnar began, his voice translated perfectly through the embassy's systems. "We are gathered here to celebrate the ongoing cooperation between our worlds and to recognize those who have contributed to greater understanding between species." The ambassador spoke about the importance of education and scientific exchange. Then he said something that made Eric stand up straighter. "Tonight we have a special announcement. The Galactic Council has approved a new communication compound for official use in diplomatic relations. This compound, developed right here on Earth, will revolutionize our telepathic interactions with empathic species across the galaxy." The crowd murmured with interest. "The compound will be known as Mason's Bridge," Ambassador Zalnar continued, "in honor of its creators, Dr. Samuel Mason and his son, Eric Mason." Eric's mouth fell open. He looked at his father, who appeared equally surprised. "Dr. Mason, Eric, would you please join me on stage?" the ambassador requested. Sam put his hand on Eric's shoulder, and together they made their way through the applauding crowd. Eric saw Professor Zarlax standing near the stage, all 4 of his eyes blinking with what Eric now recognized as Centaurian pride. On stage, Ambassador Zalnar presented them with a crystal plaque. Embedded in the center was a small vial of their compound, now officially named Mason's Bridge. "This compound will be produced in our facilities and distributed to all Galactic Council diplomatic missions," the ambassador explained. "And in recognition of Eric Mason's contribution, the Galactic Council wishes to offer him an apprenticeship with the Diplomatic Corps during his school breaks." Eric couldn't believe what he was hearing. He, a fisherman's son who just months ago had been mocked for smelling like fish, was now being offered a position with the Galactic Diplomatic Corps. The apprenticeship would include training in xenolinguistics and diplomatic protocol, Ambassador Zalnar continued. Eric would be the youngest human ever to receive such an opportunity. Sam squeezed Eric's shoulder, silently asking if this was what he wanted. Eric nodded. The crowd applauded again as Eric accepted the offer. After the ceremony, many people came to congratulate them. Eric noticed Lily in the crowd with her parents. She gave him a thumbs up. Principal Miller beamed with pride, and Professor Zarlax approached with his skin shimmering in the Centaurian expression of joy. "This is well deserved," the alien teacher said. Your work will change interspecies communication forever. I couldn't have done it without Eric, Sam said, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. And I couldn't have done it without you, Professor, Eric added. If you hadn't kicked me out of class that day, none of this would have happened. Professor Zarlax's skin darkened slightly with embarrassment, but he nodded. Sometimes, the universe works in strange ways. Later that night, as they flew home in the Bentley, Eric looked at the crystal plaque in his lap. Dad, do you think Mom would be proud? He asked quietly. Sam smiled, his eyes a little misty. More than you can imagine, Eric. She always knew you were meant for great things. They flew over their small coastal town, past the docks where their fishing boat was moored. Tomorrow, they would be back on that boat, pulling in nets and sorting fish. But now those simple actions were connected to something much bigger. Will we still go fishing? Eric asked. Even with all this new stuff happening? Of course, Sam said without hesitation. We're fishermen, remember? That's who we are. Now we're just fishermen who also happen to be changing the galaxy. As their house came into view, Eric thought about everything that had led to this moment. It had all started with a teacher yelling that he smelled like fish. What had seemed like the worst day of his life had become the beginning of something amazing. The next day, Lily came to visit. They sat on the dock, their feet dangling above the water. So you're going to be a space diplomat now, she said. That's pretty cool. Only during school breaks, Eric replied. The rest of the time, I'm still just me. Lily smiled. You were never just anything, Eric. Some people just couldn't see it until now. Eric looked out at the ocean where his father was preparing the boat for tomorrow's fishing. The sun was setting, turning the water golden. You know what's funny? He said. I'm actually glad I smelled like fish that day. Lily laughed. The smell that changed the galaxy. Eric grinned. It was a good way to describe it. The smell that changed the galaxy. And in changing the galaxy, it had also changed him.